Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Vermont filmmaker Nora Jacobson. Welcome to the show, Nora.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
Well, it's been great working with you. I think we've worked together a couple times. I think, wasn't it Prohibition?
Yes. Two of our filmmakers, Bobby Lanahan and Orly Yadin, came up and interviewed you for our movie Freedom and Unity, the Vermont movie.
Oh, so that was what I was on for. Okay, I couldn't remember because I've worked with different filmmakers, and I remember Ori and Bobby coming up, and then I had the privilege of actually watching your entire series.
Yeah, that's, you mean.
Yeah, no, just tell the viewers what that one's about.
Well, this movie is, first of all, it's a 6-part movie about Vermont. It's long. It's 8 hours long, but it's 6 movies all in one DVD. And you are in part 2, which deals with the Depression and Prohibition.
Right. All right. Well, let's just play that segment.
Okay.
These people were still living off the land. They were still tanning hides in their backyards. It was their way to adapt and survive, just as their people had done for generations before that. And so they might be the people who were running the stills during Prohibition or prostitution rings, but they were adapting and surviving the best they could.
Yeah, local people, they did their share of smuggling. They were usually just good people who saw Prohibition as a way to make extra money. But then on the other hand, there were serious smugglers who passed through the area. They'd be driving Packards and Cadillacs. It wasn't just because they had the money to do it, but it also provided the room for the booze. But there was another group of people who owned homes or barns along the border, and they would allow people to hide loads of booze inside their barns. Other people owned buildings right on the border, and they became makeshift drinking establishments. Legally, you couldn't drink on the American side of that house, but if it straddled the border, you could drink on the Canadian side of the house. But the one thing you didn't do is sometimes local people didn't understand. You didn't double-cross the big boys, and some people got hurt. We had a lot of people getting killed. We had lawmen getting killed. We had citizens getting killed. Citizens who were suddenly labeled as criminals because they either bought booze, sold booze, made booze, or transported it. But if you dig right down to it, I have yet to find any local people who got rich, but a lot of people went broke because they ended up spending 6 months in jail and their families had no money to pay the bills. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, even though, to tell you the truth, even though I have this show and I've been on several movies of some kinds or documentaries, I still hate watching myself. Do you like watching after you get a copy of this show, will you sit down and watch it?
No. I hate watching myself. When we showed the movie on Vermont PBS, they did interviews with us afterwards, and I couldn't stand watching the interviews, because I just look, anyway,
and
you know what it is.
Well, you know what it is for me, I'm almost 50. I'm going to be 50 in February. But in my mind, I'm still 25. Right. So then I see that middle-aged guy sitting where I'm supposed to be sitting, and I say, hey, wait a minute here.
That's not you.
No. Because in my mind, I still have hair.
Yeah.
So, first of all, how did you get involved with filmmaking?
Oh, I've been making movies since high school. Okay. I started as a way to get out of writing an English paper when I was in 11th or 12th grade. And so I made my first Super 8 movie. And then when I went to college, I took a couple of film classes. And then I had a really great teacher who got me hooked. And after college, I worked for a documentary filmmaker in Orford, New Hampshire. And then I went to graduate school in Chicago and studied film. And I've been making films ever since. Right.
Does Spielberg ever call you up to ask you for guidance or anything, or Ron Howard?
I wish, but they haven't yet. I still have hope.
Right. Yeah, I know. That's my producer of the show. He's
he's been waiting for one of those guys to call him too. Still hasn't happened. Now, is movie making kind of like writing, like I do? It really has to be a passion.
I think it does, yeah. I mean, I'm totally in love with every aspect of the medium. I love to shoot. I love to edit. I love adding the music. And I don't mind writing the grant proposals and the synopses. I guess I like every part of it. And I do it all the time. That's all I do, basically. I mean, I don't take vacations, and I just make movies.
When you do go somewhere, are you like me? Like, sometimes I really get on my wife's nerves because we'll go away to relax, but I can't even possibly think about relaxing without my laptop. Yeah. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I always try to orient a vacation around some project.
Oh yeah.
You know, and my partner also, like, oh God, can't we do something that's not related to filmmaking or picture taking in some way? So
yeah, we just barely got back from out west, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and everywhere I went, I thought, okay, that's going to help me for a story. I had a chance to talk to the Navajo women who were selling their wares on the side of the road, and always compartmentalizing things for some time down the road.
You didn't do a little interview with them quickly?
No, I actually chatted with them at length. I learned more about Native American history than any amount of movies I ever watched. With the Vermont movie, you actually documented its entire history, just about, all the way from Native Americans all the way up to current issues.
Yes, absolutely.
That had to have been a real undertaking, because if I recall correctly, is you basically recruited filmmakers from all over the place, and they adopted certain portions. That's how come Orly and Bobby came to me, and then you had other people go to.
Yes, absolutely. Bobby and Orly said, well, they wanted to do a piece on AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, because it turns out that the two founders are both Vermonters.
Right. Yeah, one from St. Johnsbury.
Absolutely, and one from Dorset, or
right.
East Dorset. And so getting into the AA story got them involved in Prohibition. And getting involved in Prohibition got them involved with smuggling, and that's what led them to you in your book. So they came up here, and so even though I hadn't met you, I felt I'd met you because I had spent a lot of time editing you.
We met just a few weeks ago, though, on your latest project, and that's the other thing we've got to talk about. What is your latest project that actually brings you to Orleans County?
Well, after finishing the Vermont movie, we realized that there weren't any young filmmakers involved. We were all in our late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s. And so we said, oh, well, now that that movie's done, let's try to get young Vermont filmmakers to make movies about their vision of Vermont. Because a lot of young Vermonters, they're leaving Vermont. Right. Why are they leaving Vermont? Maybe they're not finding things that interest them here. Maybe they don't feel they have a future here. Why don't we build up the film industry in Vermont and make it so that young fledgling filmmakers can feel like they might have a future here, and in the process hear what their stories are? So we started a contest, which is for films about, 2 minutes to 15 minutes in length, about Vermont from a young person's point of view. So I'm coming up to the high school here in Newport to do a brainstorming and production workshop in about an hour with kids up here.
Right.
Yeah, so, and I encourage all of the viewers here to make a short film and submit it to us, because we recently added a new category for people younger than 14 and older than 25, which was our age range. So even you, Scott, could make a movie and submit it to our contest.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to my producer about that. You know, we've had a number of people who were born and raised here who've gone on to leave their mark in the movie world. Like, one I can think of is, he's still very active, is Mike Tyberski, a North Country graduate, and he's out there in the world making movies. I'm not sure at what level at this point, but he's been recognized by the in the Sundance Film,
Really?
Sundance Film Festival.
Yeah.
So we've had, and you know about young people leaving though, being a history person, I kind of think it's not really that much of a new trend. It goes through ebbs and tides. Like for example, Horace Tabor, the Silver King of the West. He was one of the world's richest men at one point. He was considering running for president. He was born and raised in Holland, and he decided to move because he didn't really like his stepmother. And then he ended up in Colorado. But then Charles Adams, the founder of the Boston Bruins, the man who brought the NHL to this country, was from Newport Center. And I think we always have, I didn't move, even though I've traveled a lot, but I think we all have a desire to see someplace else.
Yeah.
And, I think it's great that you're involved in the young people, because I actually invite many young people onto my show because oftentimes they're talked about, but they're not talked to.
Yes.
And I happen to think that so many of today's young people are so bright. But one generation, every generation always looks back at the other generation coming and saying, well, they're lazy. I have a diary entry, and it was a woman writing it from Charleston, and you could tell she was musing, and she was just talking about these young people today. They don't want to get their clothes dirty. They want to keep their hands soft. It was written in like 1880. So in other words,
exactly.
it just, it always happens.
Yeah, well, it does, but I've been traveling around the state giving these workshops, and the kids are amazing.
That's
They're
what I'm
great.
saying.
They're so interesting.
Yeah, there are so many bright kids out there, and as I said, we spend so much time talking about them that we don't spend enough time talking to them, and I think it's great that you're involved in them, and just to see maybe where their vision for Vermont is.
Exactly, and maybe the winners. So the winners, maybe we can come on and do a show with the winners up here.
Yeah,
that would be so great.
Right. So you've been going around the state doing this, not just at North Country.
Right. Oh gosh, Hartford and Bennington. Oh, well, I didn't go to Bennington, but Castleton College and Burlington and Middlebury, St. Johnsbury. I think we've been to 32 places so far to promote the contest and to try to get young people involved.
Right. And that's a lot of work. As excited as you and I are about our work, sometimes, you probably just don't feel like as we film this show, I know you were a little nervous about getting here because it was, icy roads. So you probably weren't saying, oh boy, I've got to go up to Orleans County.
Well, that's true. Last night I was checking the weather and worrying about it because I've become a chicken in my old age. I don't like to drive in bad weather. But I'm so glad I persevered because actually the roads were fine, and I was actually excited about coming here and excited about going to the class later.
Right. So what's the time zone to produce this film?
Well, we launched it in September, so we started.
Well, I guess
talking
I should say
kids.
produce these
short films. Yeah, we launched the contest in September, and the deadline is April 10th, 2015. So they have some time. It's not like a 24-hour film slam where they have 24 hours or 48 hours to make a film, hook or by crook. They have some time to get it to be really good.
And these are, when you say short, originally I thought, well, maybe half an hour, but these are 2 to 5 minutes or something?
No. 2 to 15 minutes.
2 to 15 minutes.
Yes, and actually you can say a lot in 15 minutes. Yes, I mean, a lot of film editing is about cutting out things that you actually think you need, but you don't need. It's like writing.
Right.
I'm sure you experienced that.
Oh, sure. My editor can... She takes out, it used to be a knife, back in the old days, but now it's just cut and paste and delete and gone.
Right, and it's sometimes better, isn't it?
Right.
Even though you hate to, as they say, kill your darlings,
Right.
It makes it better.
Well, Governor Douglas was recently on the show, and he was saying that, when he wrote the book, it was, it was all important to him, but once the editor got to it, well, no, it doesn't really matter how you organized the filing cabinet. And that was one of his, because it was important to him, but it really wasn't that important to the readers. And unless you were going to have a 1,000-page book, some of those things just don't matter as much.
Well, yes, although I should say that sometimes the details are really interesting. I mean, it's what makes something go from a general story to a specific story. So you have to be careful not to cut out all the interesting little details.
Right. Well, if you read AMI writing, I can say I have a great editor who's able to clean it up, but a good editor, and I'm sure this is true in the film world, is a good editor will edit, but they won't steal your voice, because there's editing for if you edit too much, you can take that person's voice away from them.
Yes, you can take the vitality out of it. You have to be really careful. Yeah, but sometimes people find it helpful to have an outside editor, to someone to come in. And even in filmmaking, I've always edited my own films, but possibly to their detriment. I'm not sure about that. I've never had the faith in anyone else to edit my films. But they're great filmmakers who edit, like John Sayles edits his own films. I think Steven Spielberg is very involved.
So you don't do the first edit, then maybe even have your partner or somebody else just view it.
I absolutely have people look at it all the time. I mean, the Vermont movie, for example, we had our filmmakers, we would get together once a month if we could, almost every month, and show parts of the film, have rough cut sessions. And several minds are better than one, really. And I found that out with this project. I got so many good ideas from working with this group of people, and they would say, "Oh, you have to add more about farming. It's only showing one point of view because Part 5 has a lot to do with the dairy industry." And the group felt that it concentrated too much on the organic dairy world. And they were saying, well, what about the conventional dairy people? That's a huge part of the state. And so we went out and we filmed a conventional dairyman from Charlotte who had 500 dairy cows, and that made that piece 100 times better.
But you think about how many films you could make just off of farming now, because farming is a renaissance of farming now. You have your vegetable farmers, you have your organic farmers, you have your alpacas, and there's little niche farms all over the place. So you could just do another whole series just on agriculture.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, do you run into students who their first remarks are, "Well, I don't have anything to work with," but once you get talking to them, they realize everywhere they look is a story.
Exactly. Well, that's the brainstorming session that we do, and that you came to, and you gave lots of ideas. Yeah. So, yeah, there are stories everywhere. I think the kids realize that, or at least once you start brainstorming with them, they realize it pretty quickly.
So looking beyond this project, I know, at least with me, I have a series of projects going at one time. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. Do you have any other projects in the works?
Yes, I have many. I have several, more than several. I have a film about Lucy Prince, the first African-American poet who was also a Vermont settler.
Oh, really?
Yes, in the late 1700s. I have a story about her. I'm making a film about pond hockey, which is a passion of mine, at a pond near where I live.
Right.
Making a film about the great poet Ruth Stone, who was Vermont's poet laureate for a few years until she died at age 95. Right. I'm making a film about international adoption in Korea, and I've been to Korea twice, actually, to work on this project. Really? So those are just a few.
Right. I have found in the last 2 or 3 years, especially with the whole EB5 program and the redevelopment of the Northeast Kingdom, we're ground zero for filmmakers and movie makers of some kind, because of my internet presence, I'm often contacted by different film crews. Recently, one was out of Australia, another one was Manhattan. And sometimes, like with you, I have faith in you of what your product is, but sometimes people contact me. Like there's one that I'm a little hesitant on. They want to make a reality TV show for 18 to 25-year-olds involved. That would be like a MTV thing, except for a redneck country version, like hunting and mudding and so on. And I'm a little concerned. I don't want to have it end up being like the Jersey Shore type of thing. And so every once in a while, and then when you talk to some big city film people, they almost sound disappointed when I tell them, we do have electricity up here, because there's such a misconception about Vermont as a whole.
Yes, well, it's true. And I was recently looking at a film that someone made. He's obviously a New Yorker. He made a feature film about Vermont, and his characters are quite stereotypical, too much so, like putting on the accent way too much. He made one of the characters, who's a mailman, made a comment about poor farms. He said, "Oh, take the left there onto Poor Farm Road. We have a lot of poor farms around here. Ha ha ha." But of course, without realizing, the writer didn't realize, of course, that poor farms were a part of how we took care of poor people in Vermont. They weren't poor farmers who were poor.
Right.
They were where poor people, indigent Vermonters, went to work and have a bed and a meal.
Right. Well, it's like, for example, a lot of people I talk to, they have no idea how the City Farm Road got its name. Because we grew up with it. And I said, do you know why it's named that? No. I said, that's where the City Farm was. That is where the city had their farm, and it was their poor farm.
Exactly. What would be really great would be for someone to do a film about the place names around here.
Right.
Esther Swift, wonderful Vermont librarian, actually wrote a book called Vermont Place Names.
Right.
She died recently, very elderly. But just looking into the place names would be so fascinating, because then you'd find out, why is it called Town Farm Road or City Farm Road or French Farm Road or Irish Settlement Road?
Right. Well, and that's it, is because sometimes people ask me things like that, and there are things I've never even thought about before. So when somebody asks me, it's like, that's a good question. And back to young people, the project you're working on now, I love working with especially high school age kids, because there's so much into questioning, not at the higher level, but some of the questions they ask you are so basic that they actually make you really think. Because sometimes I have the big answers, but sometimes it's the most common sense things that I'm asked by young people that I really have to think about.
Yes. Well, I hope you'll consider mentoring some of the students that are making their films.
Right. I have a zillion photos that they can use. They're all digital. So if any focuses on the history of Newport, like I was just contacted by a person from St. Michael's College, who they're doing for a project about the history of Newport.
Really?
So,
why don't we get them involved in submitting their film to the movie contest?
I'm not sure if it was film or writing.
Oh.
So.
But anyway, you're going to help them?
Yeah, I help people all the time, because if people think I know a lot, I've really fooled them. I just know the people who know, and what I do is I direct people to where, the people, like usually, do you find that the people who jump up and down and say they know the most are usually not the people you really want to talk to? It's that old farmer who basically starts off by saying, well, I don't really have much to say. But then by the time you're done, your jaw has dropped. You can't believe everything. You can't believe how much that person held in their
Yes.
heads.
Yes, well, that gets to the whole interviewing technique. I don't know if you have a particular way you interview people, but that's some of the things that we'll probably cover today, is how do you get information out of someone in a way that makes them speak in images and describe life?
You know what I tell people is, and you might actually disagree with me, I don't sit there with a list. I don't go name, rank, and serial number. I might have a list of questions in my head or maybe in back of my notebook.
Yeah.
The other thing I do is, instead of scribbling notes all the time, I actually use a recorder, because for some reason, because if you can have your arms be going while you're talking, they get a little more animated.
Yeah.
And but I do have one thing that's good for me. It's like when I did my book on Prohibition, it helped, especially this is years ago, when I talked to people who were involved in the illegal end of it, when I was able to tell them, hey, my grandfather spent time in prison for Prohibition, it was like, and they just loved that. But because my family's been here for generations, I think it was a little bit easier for me. Whereas I've often wondered, if you're coming in from elsewhere, there must be because there is a dance a lot of time when you start working with people, especially older people. They're wary. They want to know what you're up to.
Yeah.
And, I think I get a little bit of a pass occasionally on that because, I was born and raised here, and people...
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I've made films in a lot of different places that I'm not from. I mean, I do happen to be from Vermont, but I lived in Hoboken, New Jersey for 15 years and made a film there. So I had to win the trust of the people there. Sometimes, though, I have found that people really want to talk. It's almost like a form of therapy
Oh, sure they
for
do.
themselves.
Oh, you're so right. And it's just like, with the older generation, you think of them as stoic and silent or what? No. They're happy. A lot of them are happy-go-lucky. And here's the secret: I don't know if you realize this. Women are the stronger sex. No ifs,
Oh, I
ands,
know that.
no doubt about it. And I watch this in the older generation. Is the women were really the leaders of the family. Their husbands may not have known it, but they were. And but on the other hand, the sad part is, I can take a 95-year-old man, and they'll tell stories all day. And if I ask the wife, so tell me about, I didn't really do anything. I just stayed home. I did the cooking, the cleaning. But so tell me about the cooking. And then it's like, they didn't pop things in the microwaves, and they made, they would take old clothes, rip them apart, and then sew them back together and made totally different clothes. And so a lot of times I find it's harder to get at the stories of the women.
Yeah, I think that's true. They're so used to being silenced, to having their voices silenced.
Right. Or sometimes they just don't feel like they've done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, is one group of veterans. I have interviewed dozens and hundreds of veterans. Women veterans don't feel like they've done anything, because most of them never, especially World War II, they didn't go into the war zone unless you were a nurse or something. So because they didn't go to war, they don't feel they have actually done anything.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my own mother, I've been trying to get her to write her memoirs for years, and she's always reticent. Oh, no one's interested. And finally, she's 89. I've finally gotten her to start doing it. I'm so happy.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I can interview your parents. You could probably interview mine, but I have such a hard time interviewing my own family.
Really?
It just seems kind of weird to. So I've gotten my parents' stories through bits and pieces, and I've got it all together. And but it just to sit down and say, all right, I'm going to interview you now. So okay, we only have a couple more minutes. Okay. You're up in New Orleans County to go to North Country to work with some kids there to help develop these movies. And again, when will those be done?
The deadline is April 10th,
Right.
2015. Our website, if anyone's interested, is www.freedomandunitytv.net. And that's where you can download an entry form and find out about the contest. But we hope people will submit their films a little earlier than April
Right.
10th so that we have more time, because we are going to be giving prizes and exposure at various film festivals, like at the Film Festival in White River Junction at the end of April. We'll be showing the winners.
So once you have all these done, all the prizes awarded, are you considering compiling them all for
Yes.
something?
Oh yeah, we're making we have a website, and we're going to have the films on the website, the winners certainly, and the runners up. Well, I don't think we'll show every single film that's submitted. Then we have a Vimeo channel, we have a YouTube channel. We're hoping to get them onto, this show possibly.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then Vermont PBS is hoping to partner with us and show it on Vermont PBS, and then at the film festivals, and maybe even have a big, my dream is to have a conference film festival where all of the filmmakers who participated will come one day this next summer, and we'll show lots and lots of the films, and we'll have the winners, and we'll get young people around Vermont to come and talk to each other and exchange about their experiences, both as filmmakers and Vermonters.
Now, is your contact information on your website, or do you want to share that?
Yes, well, absolutely. So to contact us, it's info@freedomandunitytv.net. You can also contact us at info@thevermontmovie.com if you're interested in getting a copy of the movie, which I hope people will take a look at. I think you have a copy,
Yep.
Scott. I don't know if you've looked at it yet.
Yep.
But we've been going around the state showing it in libraries all over Vermont. Right. So, and it's got a lot of different examples of filmmaking techniques.
Right.
So people can look at them and say, "Oh, I think I'd like to make a little reenactment movie or a documentary or an animation."
You're open to a lot of
Yeah.
ideas.
Yes.
Okay, well, all right. Okay, well, our time is up. And I just want to thank you for coming on, and thank you for all the good work you're doing, because you are recording pieces of the history of Vermont.
Yes, well, thank you, Scott. You're doing the same in writing.
Right.
So I really appreciate your work, too.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.
Bye, everyone.